The sound of the aircraft's engines hummed steadily, lulling the passengers into a sense of calm. It was supposed to be a typical flight. Elon Musk, the world-renowned tech entrepreneur and CEO of SpaceX and Tesla, boarded the flight just like any other high-profile figure would, quietly, swiftly, and without making a scene. As he walked down the narrow aisle, his mind was preoccupied with the upcoming meeting in New York, where he was set to discuss groundbreaking plans for a new space mission. His focus was entirely on the future, as usual. But today, something would happen that would alter the course of this flight, and quite possibly, change the way people viewed him. It wasn't the lavish, celebrity treatment one might expect for someone like Musk. He wasn't being escorted to first class or given special privileges. Instead, he walked toward a window seat in coach, his favorite spot when he traveled privately, without the need for bodyguards or excessive fanfare. He was dressed in a simple black hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, trying to blend in like the average traveler. Despite his fame, Elon had always preferred the quiet moments of a flight to collect his thoughts, strategize, or simply catch up on work. The plane was nearly full, with only a few empty seats scattered around the cabin. Elon settled into his seat, adjusting his seatbelt and flipping open his laptop. As the flight took off, he lost himself in his thoughts, unaware that what would unfold during the next few hours would be anything but ordinary. Around 20 minutes into the flight, the unease began. A flight attendant, a woman in her mid-30s, made her way down the aisle, offering drinks to the passengers. When she reached Elon's row, she paused for a moment, scanning him. She seemed to recognize him, but it wasn't until she was a few steps past that she suddenly stopped in her tracks. Turning on her heel, she marched back to Elon's seat. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her tone sharp but polite. "I'm going to need you to leave the plane." Elon, who had been typing notes on his laptop, raised an eyebrow in confusion. He looked up from his screen, glancing at her in disbelief. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I need you to leave the plane," the attendant repeated, now standing firmly with her arms crossed. "You're causing a disruption. It's not just your political views, it's your entire public persona. I'm afraid you've become a liability to the safety and comfort of this flight." Musk was stunned, but his voice remained calm. He had faced his fair share of controversy, particularly over his outspoken views on technology, politics, and the future of humanity. But being kicked off a plane mid-flight? This was new. "I'm not sure I understand," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I haven't done anything that should warrant being removed from the plane. I'm just trying to get to my destination." The attendant didn't back down. "Your very presence on this plane, with your views on climate change and the environment, is enough to create a toxic environment for the passengers. We cannot allow it." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the cabin as the other passengers turned their heads, some looking at each other in confusion, others watching the confrontation unfold. Elon, realizing the situation was escalating quickly, leaned back in his seat, staring at the attendant for a moment before responding. "Is this really necessary?" he asked, his voice cool but edged with a hint of frustration. "You're asking me to leave because of my views on climate change? I'm literally trying to create solutions for the environment with SpaceX and Tesla." The attendant's eyes narrowed. "I'm not interested in your excuses. You have to leave. Now." Elon could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the eyes watching him from all around. The flight attendant's words had ignited something in the cabin, but it wasn't just her. Musk's reputation, his very presence on that plane, was clearly stirring something deeper. Some passengers were beginning to murmur in agreement with the attendant, while others appeared more sympathetic toward him. There was a palpable sense of division in the air, and it was clear that this wasn't just about a disagreement over political views. This was about something bigger, something that had been brewing for a long time. The attendant's gaze never left Musk, her posture rigid with authority. "I'll be calling the captain if you don't comply," she threatened, her voice unwavering. The other passengers watched intently, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others whispering amongst themselves. A man in the row across from Elon, who had been eavesdropping on the conversation, stood up and spoke out, "This is ridiculous. He's not doing anything wrong. Why are you targeting him?" The flight attendant gave a brief, dismissive glance toward the man, but Elon was already speaking up again, his voice louder now as he stood up from his seat. "Look, I get that my opinions are divisive, but I'm not causing any trouble here. I'm just on a flight, heading to an important meeting." The tension in the cabin reached a boiling point. The conversation had quickly escalated from a simple disagreement to an open confrontation, one that had now drawn the attention of every single person in the cabin. It was clear that this was no longer just about Musk. This was a clash of ideologies, a battle of political beliefs playing out at 30,000 feet. One of the passengers, a woman sitting in the row behind Musk, finally spoke up, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's not just about the climate, though, is it? It's everything you represent, the way you've built your empire on technology and wealth while disregarding the consequences for others." Elon turned slowly to face the woman, his face betraying no anger, only a quiet resolve. "I didn't get to where I am by ignoring problems," he said, his voice measured. "I've dedicated my life to solving big challenges. I may not be perfect, but I'm trying to make a difference. And that's why I'm on this plane right now, heading to a meeting where we'll discuss the future of clean energy, of space exploration, and of how to make life better for everyone." The woman didn't respond immediately, but her expression softened. The room grew silent for a moment as the passengers took in Elon's words. It wasn't the kind of conversation they expected to have on a plane, let alone with a man of Musk's stature. Before anyone could react, the captain's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to need to make a decision here," the captain's calm but authoritative voice echoed in the cabin. "We've been informed of the situation, and we need to resolve it quickly. Please remain seated, and we'll be back shortly with further instructions." The hum of the engines filled the silence again as the passengers exchanged nervous glances. Elon Musk, caught in the middle of an unexpected storm, sat back down in his seat. He couldn't help but wonder how a simple flight had turned into a spectacle. What had started as a routine trip was now spiraling into something far more complex. Something that could change everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As the minutes passed in the tense atmosphere of the plane, Elon Musk sat quietly in his seat, his mind drifting back to the long journey that had brought him here, to this very moment. The situation with the flight attendant was unusual, but it was far from the first time he had been at the center of a controversy. If anything, this was just another chapter in the roller coaster of his life, a life defined by audacity, ambition, and an unwavering belief in the power of technology to change the world. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, in 1971, Elon had always been different from the other kids. Even as a child, his mind was wired differently, constantly curious, always seeking answers, always dreaming bigger. At just 12 years old, he taught himself how to program computers and created a video game called Blaster, which he sold for $500. It wasn't much, but it was a glimpse into the entrepreneurial spirit that would drive him for the rest of his life. As he grew older, Elon moved to Canada at age 17 to attend Queen's University, leaving behind his home country and the difficult memories of his childhood. His parents had separated when he was young, and his father was often distant and emotionally unavailable. Despite these challenges, Elon pressed forward. He transferred to the University of Pennsylvania in the U.S., where he earned degrees in both physics and economics. His time at university solidified his belief that technology could change the world, and he was ready to lead that change. After dropping out of a PhD program at Stanford University just 2 days into it, Elon was ready to take his first step into the business world. His first venture, Zip2, was a software company that helped newspapers go online. It was sold for nearly $300 million, and Elon used the proceeds to create X.com, a company that would later become PayPal. When PayPal was sold to eBay for $1.5 billion, Elon became a multimillionaire, but he wasn't content with just that. He invested the bulk of his newfound wealth into his next projects, Tesla, SpaceX, SolarCity, and later, Neuralink and the Boring Company. But these weren't just companies, they were missions. Missions to revolutionize industries, to make the impossible possible. SpaceX was meant to take humanity to Mars, Tesla to reduce dependence on fossil fuels and prove that electric vehicles could be both practical and desirable, and SolarCity to make renewable energy accessible for all. With each endeavor, Elon's reputation grew, and so did the controversy surrounding him. In the public eye, Elon Musk was a larger-than-life figure. The media hailed him as a genius, a visionary, and at times, a madman. But there was another side to him, one that was often overlooked. Behind the headlines and Twitter rants, Elon was a father of 5, a son with a complicated family history, and a man who wrestled with the weight of his own expectations. He had suffered failures and setbacks that could have broken most people, but not him. He thrived on adversity. And then there were the public battles, the ideological ones, the ones that painted him as a polarizing figure. People either loved him or hated him. His outspoken nature and unconventional ideas had earned him both fervent admirers and harsh critics. His comments on climate change, artificial intelligence, and the role of government in the tech industry often left people divided. But that didn't seem to bother him. In fact, it seemed to fuel his drive even more. Elon wasn't in it for popularity or comfort. He was in it to change the world, and he knew that in order to do that, he would have to face the critics, the doubters, and the naysayers head-on. So, as the plane continued its journey through the sky, Elon couldn't help but reflect on the years of hard work and sacrifice that had brought him to this point. He thought about the struggles, losing his first marriage to Justine Musk, the intense pressure of running multiple companies at once, and the personal toll it had taken on him. He also thought about his 5 children, Xae, 12, Nevada, Griffin, Kai, and Saxon, and the future he wanted to build for them. He was doing all of this for them, for humanity. But sometimes, the weight of that responsibility felt overwhelming. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a voice overhead. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom once again, calling for calm among the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're currently experiencing a delay in our flight schedule. We ask that you remain seated and patient as we work to resolve the situation. We will update you shortly." Elon let out a sigh, his fingers tapping nervously on the armrest. He couldn't help but wonder if this situation, this confrontation with the flight attendant, was a sign. Maybe the world was finally ready for a reckoning, an acknowledgement that progress, no matter how much it may challenge the status quo, would always face opposition. Looking out of the window, Elon could see the sun dipping below the horizon, casting a warm golden light across the clouds. It was a beautiful sight, one that reminded him why he fought so hard. To give humanity a chance to reach for the stars, to push beyond the boundaries of what was thought possible. But in that moment, he also realized something else. No matter how high he aimed, no matter how far he tried to reach, there would always be someone trying to pull him back down to earth. The flight attendant, whose name Elon still didn't know, had certainly made it clear that she wasn't one of his supporters. But what was her story? What had driven her to take such a firm stand against him? What made her feel so strongly about his actions and beliefs that she would go to such lengths, even in a public setting like this, to make her feelings known? As Elon mused on these questions, the tension in the cabin continued to simmer. The passengers were no longer just quiet observers, they were now participants in something larger than themselves. This was no longer about just one man's controversial views. This was a microcosm of the larger cultural divide that had gripped the nation for years. Elon's mind returned to the meeting in New York that awaited him. But as the plane journeyed toward its destination, he couldn't help but wonder if this unexpected disruption in his routine was a reminder of something even more pressing. Perhaps this was the true challenge, the ability to face the opposition, to understand those who disagreed with him, and to find a way forward despite the turbulence. Maybe, just maybe, the real journey was about bridging the gap between ideologies. And as the plane continued its course, Elon Musk braced himself for what would come next, because he knew, no matter how much he tried to control the narrative, the flight attendant's words would continue to echo in his mind. The intercom buzzed again, and the captain's voice came through, slightly more urgent this time. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are making arrangements for a change in course. Please remain in your seats and fasten your seatbelts. We will update you shortly." Elon Musk's eyes flickered to the woman who had caused the ruckus, the flight attendant. She was standing near the back of the cabin now, talking in hushed tones with two other flight attendants. It seemed like they were discussing what to do next. Elon couldn't hear the details, but from the way they were all looking at him, he knew this wasn't just about his political views anymore. This was something more. The other passengers seemed uneasy. Some were whispering to one another, and a few even glanced over at Elon, curiosity and judgment written across their faces. Others appeared to be scrolling through their phones, perhaps sharing the drama on social media, or looking for information about the situation. But for Elon, this was no longer just an inconvenience. It was a growing storm, and the more it intensified, the more he realized that this moment wasn't just about him being kicked off a plane. This was a larger issue, one that extended beyond his personal experience. The woman, the flight attendant, was now walking down the aisle toward Elon's row. Her face was still set, determined, as if she were about to deliver the final blow. Elon could see her eyes flicker toward the other passengers as if she were gauging their reactions. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "Mr. Musk, I've just spoken to the captain, and I've been instructed to ask you to exit the plane at the nearest airport. We're currently diverting the flight. We don't have much time." Elon's expression remained calm, but inside, a wave of frustration and disbelief was starting to build. Exit the plane. This wasn't a casual request, it was a mandate. His eyes flickered briefly to the window, as if he could somehow find answers in the distant, stormy clouds below. He was headed to New York for an important business meeting that could change the future of renewable energy, but now this woman was forcing him to leave mid-flight. He stood up, gathering his things, his mind racing. He wasn't afraid of the confrontation, he had been through too much in his life to be intimidated by a flight attendant. What disturbed him was the principle behind it. He had spent decades building companies that would literally change the world, from Tesla's electric vehicles to SpaceX's rockets that could take humanity to Mars. But for some, none of it mattered. To them, his opinions, on climate change, on technology, on the future of humanity, made him a target. And it seemed that, in this moment, this flight attendant had made him the symbol of everything they opposed. As he walked toward the aisle, the other passengers' eyes followed him, and the murmurs began again. A young man in a hoodie, sitting a few rows ahead of Elon, turned in his seat and spoke up. "Wait, what are you doing? You can't just kick him off the plane. He's Elon Musk. He's literally trying to save the planet." The flight attendant, standing near the door now, didn't flinch. "I've already made my decision," she said coldly, her eyes hardening. "This is for the safety and comfort of all passengers. We're not having a man with your views on board anymore." Elon felt his blood run cold. There was something almost surreal about this entire exchange. Here he was, the CEO of multi-billion-dollar companies, being treated like a criminal for nothing more than having a public stance that differed from hers. He had faced criticism before, sure, but this was something else. He couldn't help but think back to the countless people who had undermined his ideas over the years, the ones who had told him that electric cars were a pipe dream, or that humans would never make it to Mars. But he always pushed forward. This situation was no different, despite the fact that it was unfolding in the most bizarre way possible. As he neared the exit, he realized something important: this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about the clash of two opposing worldviews, two forces that had been at odds for as long as he could remember. He glanced toward the flight attendants, all of them now watching him intently. The one who had started this entire ordeal, her name was Jenna, was still standing by the door, her eyes locked on him. Elon took a deep breath, then paused, turning back to the rest of the passengers. "You know, I never expected this. I always thought the greatest challenges would come from the things I can't control, like engineering a rocket to Mars, or making an electric car that could actually change the world. But now, it seems that the real challenge is getting on a plane without being told my beliefs are a problem." The room was silent. Everyone was waiting for what he would say next. Jenna's expression didn't change, but a flicker of something crossed her face, doubt, perhaps. Or maybe something deeper, a realization that this wasn't just about her job. This was about a much bigger conversation. "Let me tell you something," Elon continued, his voice calm but firm. "I've spent my life trying to make the world a better place. I don't have all the answers. But I believe in progress. I believe that humanity can overcome its challenges, whether it's climate change, space exploration, or the power of renewable energy. I may not always be popular, but I'm doing my part." Jenna didn't respond, but the other passengers were looking at him now, their expressions shifting. Some seemed moved, others skeptical. Elon could feel the weight of their gazes, the judgment in the air. With a final look toward Jenna, he said, "I'll leave, but I want you all to think about something, about where we're going, and what we're allowing ourselves to become. If we can't even have a conversation about our differences without tearing each other down, then we're all in bigger trouble than we think." As he turned to leave, the cabin buzzed with whispers. It wasn't just a fight about ideas anymore, it was about power, control, and the way people with different perspectives viewed each other. It was clear that this situation was more than just a momentary inconvenience. This was a clash of values, one that was simmering beneath the surface of society, waiting to explode. And it seemed that the explosion had just begun. The air was thick with tension as Elon made his way toward the exit. His mind was racing, but there was a strange sense of calm that had settled over him. He had spent decades fighting for his beliefs, confronting doubters and critics at every turn, but this felt different. The scenario wasn't just about a misunderstanding or a business disagreement, it was personal now. As he approached the door, the murmurs of the passengers grew louder, some expressing support, others disbelief. The flight attendants stood by, eyes trained on him, their expressions a mixture of discomfort and resolution. Jenna, the flight attendant who had caused this disruption, was still standing near the exit, arms crossed, awaiting his exit. But then, something unexpected happened. "Hold on, Mr. Musk." A deep voice came from behind him. Elon stopped in his tracks. He didn't recognize the man who had spoken, but his voice was familiar, authoritative, assertive. It carried a weight that commanded attention. Elon turned to find a middle-aged man dressed in a dark suit. His gray hair was neatly combed, and there was a seriousness to his face that contrasted sharply with the chaos surrounding them. He wasn't a member of the flight crew, but he appeared to have some kind of authority. The other passengers took notice, and the whispers escalated. "Mr. Musk," the man said again, now standing directly in front of him, "I'm with the airline's legal team. There's been a misunderstanding. I've just spoken to the captain, and we're arranging a course correction. This flight will continue on its path, and you won't need to leave." Elon raised an eyebrow, uncertainty creeping into his thoughts. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice steady, though a little tinged with the exhaustion of the moment. "Why did I get singled out like this?" The man cleared his throat, his eyes darting briefly toward Jenna before focusing back on Elon. "There was a miscommunication with the flight crew, and they misunderstood your intentions when you boarded. There's no reason for you to leave the plane, and the captain agrees. We'll make sure your travel plans aren't disrupted." Elon studied the man's face, trying to determine if he was being genuine or simply trying to smooth over a situation that had gone horribly wrong. The flight attendants, for their part, still looked tense, their eyes flicking from him to the mysterious man and then back to the rest of the passengers. Jenna, however, didn't appear convinced. She exchanged a brief, wary glance with the legal team member before speaking up. "I don't think this is something that can just be brushed aside," she said, her tone sharper now. "His views." "Enough," the man interjected, his voice more forceful than before. "This is not about personal views. This is about protocol and ensuring that the flight operates smoothly. There are other passengers on this plane who deserve to travel in peace." Elon could sense the quiet tension building, the conflict that had been bubbling just below the surface threatening to boil over. He had dealt with confrontations like this before, but this felt different. There were no rules for this kind of clash. The conflict between personal belief, corporate power, and public perception was far more complicated than any boardroom meeting or regulatory hurdle he had ever faced. After a long pause, Elon nodded slowly, processing the information. "So, we're going back on track." He glanced around the cabin, his gaze meeting the passengers, many of whom still seemed uncertain about what was happening. "Yes," the legal man confirmed, his tone calming. "We're going to continue our flight. I'm very sorry for the misunderstanding." Elon's eyes narrowed slightly. Something about the way the man said "misunderstanding" felt rehearsed, as if the entire situation had been orchestrated from the start. But he couldn't linger on that. His goal was to get to New York, to get back to his work, and to ensure that his companies could continue to make strides toward their lofty, world-changing goals. "All right," Elon said, finally relenting. "But if this happens again, I'm not going to let it slide. Not this time." The legal representative gave a short nod, then stepped back, signaling to the flight attendants that the issue was resolved. As Elon made his way back to his seat, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. There was something strange about the entire situation, the way it had escalated so quickly, the intensity with which the attendants had acted, and the mysterious figure who had appeared out of nowhere. Elon sat back down, fastening his seatbelt once more. His thoughts raced. What was really happening here? Was this a coincidence? Or was there something more to the situation, something deeper that he wasn't yet seeing? He couldn't help but remember a moment from his past, when he had been in a similar position, questioning the motivations of others, trying to separate the facts from the noise. In those moments, he'd learned to trust his instincts, to dig deeper, and to never take things at face value. If this was some kind of orchestrated attack on him or his beliefs, he would find out. But for now, all he could do was wait. He could feel the eyes of the other passengers on him, the judgment and curiosity in the air. They were all witnessing something they hadn't expected, something that would leave them with a story to tell, but also with questions. Why was Elon Musk being kicked off a plane? Was it about his views, or was it something else entirely? The plane began to climb again, resuming its original course. Outside the window, the clouds swirled and parted, the orange light of the setting sun illuminating the horizon. Elon sat back, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling in his gut. The flight might have been back on track, but the real journey was just beginning. As the plane leveled out, the tension in the cabin seemed to dissipate, but only just. The hum of the engines was a constant reminder of the journey ahead, and yet the unsettling events of the past hour seemed to linger in the air, like a storm waiting to break. Elon Musk leaned back in his seat, staring out the window. The sunlight was fading, casting long shadows over the landscape below. His mind wandered, back to his companies, his projects, the monumental goals he had set for himself and humanity. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, the Boring Company, these were the things that mattered. But now, all of a sudden, a small flight had turned into something far more significant. He ran his hand through his hair, trying to shake off the nagging feeling in his gut. What was that back there? The legal representative who'd appeared out of nowhere was just too convenient. And the way Jenna, the flight attendant, had reacted to everything, it was as if she had been waiting for a reason to call him out. The more he thought about it, the more it felt like a carefully orchestrated attack. But by who? And why? Before he could dwell on it any longer, the same legal man, whom Elon had just spoken with, came down the aisle again. His serious demeanor hadn't changed, but there was something different about the way he was looking at Elon now. It was as if he had more to say, something important, something that could explain everything. Elon's heart skipped a beat. The man stood in the aisle beside his seat, eyes glancing around to ensure no one was paying too much attention before speaking in a low voice. "Mr. Musk, I need to talk to you privately. There's something you need to know." Elon's curiosity piqued. This wasn't something he had anticipated, but now, after everything that had happened, he couldn't ignore the feeling that the universe was forcing him to confront something much bigger than a simple dispute on a plane. "All right," Elon said, his voice steady. "What is it?" The man looked around again, then leaned in closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "It's about Jenna. She's not just a flight attendant. She's part of a larger group. A group that doesn't want you to succeed. They've been tracking your movements, trying to find a way to disrupt your work." Elon raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "A group? What do you mean?" "I'm not at liberty to say more right now, but let's just say they're well-funded and well-connected. They've been actively working against you for months, trying to undermine your reputation and your projects. This incident, it wasn't a coincidence. It was planned." Elon felt his pulse quicken. Who were these people? What did they want from him? Before he could respond, the man quickly stood upright, his eyes darting back to the flight attendants. "You need to be careful. They're watching. All of us. Including you." With that, the man walked away, disappearing into the cabin. Elon sat there, staring at the spot where he had just been standing, his thoughts racing. This was bigger than he had imagined. A group, one with power and influence, was actively working against him. He had faced plenty of opposition in his career, but this was different. This felt personal. For the first time since he had boarded the plane, Elon felt a cold, uneasy sensation in the pit of his stomach. It wasn't just the flight anymore. This was a full-blown conspiracy, and he was the target. The minutes passed slowly, the flight carrying on as planned. The cabin remained quiet, but Elon couldn't shake the nagging feeling in his mind. His fingers drummed restlessly on the armrest, his thoughts swirling. How long had this group been operating? What did they hope to gain from bringing him down? As he sat there, lost in his thoughts, Jenna appeared again. This time, her eyes seemed different. She wasn't standing with the other flight attendants. Instead, she was walking toward him, her expression unreadable. Elon's mind raced. Was this another attempt to confront him? Or was there something else going on? She reached his seat and stopped, glancing around to ensure no one was paying attention. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice low but steady, "we need to talk." Elon raised an eyebrow, surprised by her sudden change in tone. "About what?" he asked, his voice guarded. Jenna's eyes flickered nervously, but she squared her shoulders and spoke again, this time more urgently. "This isn't what it seems. The whole thing, it wasn't just about your views. I never wanted it to escalate like this. But I'm trapped, too. You're not the only one who's being watched." Elon's heart skipped a beat. What was she talking about? "I was told to keep an eye on you," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "They told me to make sure you didn't get to New York. They knew this flight was important to you, and they figured if they could disrupt it, they could get to you. They've been monitoring your every move, Mr. Musk. And they won't stop until they've taken you down." Elon's mind spun. He had suspected something was off, but now, hearing it from her directly, it felt all too real. Who were these people? Who are they? Elon demanded. And why are you helping them? Jenna shook her head, her face a mixture of fear and frustration. I didn't have a choice. I've been forced into this. I can't talk too much, but you're not alone in this. Others have been watching you too. But you need to be careful, Mr. Musk. They're closer than you think. And they're not going to stop. Before Elon could respond, she turned quickly and walked away, disappearing back into the galley. Elon sat there, numb. The realization was hitting him harder than anything else. He had been targeted, and not just by the flight attendants or the airline. This was something far bigger, something with an agenda to dismantle everything he had worked for. And the worst part? The people behind it were already ahead of him. But they didn't realize one thing. He wasn't someone who backed down. The minutes that followed felt like hours. Elon sat in his seat, his mind racing, the revelations from both the mysterious legal representative and Jenna swirling in his thoughts. The flight continued on its steady path, but inside him, a storm was brewing. The more he thought about the mysterious group, the more questions emerged. Who were they? Why him? What could they possibly gain from targeting him, a man who had spent his entire career trying to push the boundaries of innovation? As he pondered, the plane started to descend toward its layover airport, an unexpected stop, as the captain had just informed the passengers. The announcement, though, barely registered in Elon's mind. The wheels of his thoughts were spinning faster than the airplane's descent. Everything was coming into focus, but there was still so much unknown. Then, as the plane touched down and taxied to a standstill, Elon made a decision. He wasn't going to let this moment define him. His work, his vision, was too important to be derailed by shadowy figures who were operating in the background, pulling strings. As the flight attendants began to direct passengers to the exits, Elon stood up, grabbing his briefcase. The man in the suit, the one from the airline's legal team, had been watching him from a distance. The tension between them was palpable. Elon knew he needed answers, and he wasn't going to let this mystery go unresolved. He walked purposefully toward the man. Where are we? Elon asked, his voice steady but firm. We've diverted to a smaller airport just outside the city, the man replied. We're on schedule to refuel and continue the flight to New York in about an hour. Elon nodded but didn't miss the nervous glance the man threw at the flight attendants behind him. The crew was still managing the passengers, but there was an air of uncertainty about them. Elon was starting to get the sense that he wasn't the only one who felt like something was off. He could see it in the way they avoided eye contact, the way they whispered to one another when they thought no one was listening. Tell me everything you know about this group, Elon demanded, his voice low but unwavering. He wasn't asking anymore. He was done with games. The man hesitated, glancing around nervously. I'm not authorized to discuss it, Mr. Musk. This is beyond my control. But I can assure you, we're handling the situation. Handling the situation? Elon's voice rose, louder than he had intended. You think this is something you can just handle? This isn't just a situation. This is a direct attack on me, and I deserve answers. Who are they? Why target me? Why not let me get to New York and do what I do best, innovate? The legal man seemed to shrink under Elon's intense gaze. The words were coming faster now, like a dam about to burst. Before he could finish, a sudden voice interrupted. Elon. Elon turned sharply to find Jenna standing at the end of the aisle, her face pale but determined. She was holding a phone in her hand, and for a moment, it looked like she was debating whether or not to approach him. Jenna, what are you doing here? Elon asked, his frustration now laced with confusion. She stepped forward cautiously. I know you're angry, Mr. Musk. But you need to listen. There's a lot more going on here than you realize. Elon exhaled sharply, his patience thinning. I've heard enough about these people, Jenna. Who are they? What do they want from me? She looked over her shoulder before stepping closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. They're trying to stop everything you're doing. It's not just about your views anymore. They want to take down Tesla, SpaceX, everything. You're too dangerous to them. Your vision, it's a threat to their entire operation. Elon was momentarily taken aback. A threat? To what? What kind of operation? I can't explain all of it now, she said, her voice trembling. But they have eyes everywhere. They control media, politics, even parts of the tech world. They see your success as a direct challenge to their control over the global market. You're disrupting things in ways they can't predict, and they're afraid of what happens next. Elon absorbed her words. A part of him felt a pang of disbelief. Was this some sort of elaborate conspiracy? Or was Jenna simply trying to cover up her own involvement? He couldn't tell for sure, but there was something about the way she spoke, her tone, the fear in her eyes, that made him think she was telling the truth. They've been using you as a pawn, Jenna continued, her voice softer now. You've been so focused on the bigger picture, the future, the technology, that you haven't realized they're controlling everything behind the scenes. They orchestrated this whole thing, you're being kicked off the plane, the disruption, all of it. Elon took a step back, his mind whirling. It sounded like a plot straight out of a thriller. But if it was true, the implications were staggering. So, what now? Elon asked, trying to ground himself in the conversation. What do I do? Jenna hesitated for a long moment, then said something that caught him off guard. You have to fight back. Don't let them win. You've been too passive for too long. They want to control the narrative. You need to take control of your own story. She handed him the phone she had been holding, her hands shaking slightly. This is a recording. I'm risking everything by giving this to you. It's proof of their involvement. It's only the beginning, but it's enough to make them realize they've underestimated you. Elon took the phone from her, his eyes scanning the screen. There was a video file, but he didn't have time to watch it now. He slipped the phone into his jacket pocket, then looked back at Jenna. Thank you, he said simply, his voice full of resolve. She gave him a hesitant nod. You don't have much time. Trust no one. Not even me. But you can stop them. You have to. With that, Jenna turned and walked back down the aisle, disappearing into the galley once more. Elon stood there for a moment, staring at the place where she had just been. The weight of what she had said was heavy, but it didn't scare him. If anything, it made him feel more determined than ever. This was bigger than just a plain incident or a personal attack. This was about the future of innovation, the freedom to push boundaries, and the relentless fight against those who would rather maintain control. He had a long road ahead of him, but he wasn't about to back down now. Elon Musk sat in the small airport lounge, staring at the phone in his hand. He hadn't played the video that Jenna had given him yet. His mind was too consumed by everything that had just happened, everything he had learned. A conspiracy, a vast network of powerful individuals determined to stop him. The implications were staggering. This was bigger than he had ever imagined. But for the first time in a long time, Elon felt a spark of determination. He was ready to fight back. The small airport was quieter than usual. Passengers, most of them oblivious to the chaos surrounding Elon, sat in silence, waiting for their flights to continue. But for Elon, there was no returning to the normalcy of just another business trip. His life had just taken a sharp turn into something much darker, much more complex. The world outside the lounge's windows was a blur of darkness. The setting sun had long since disappeared behind the horizon, and the airport, bathed in artificial lights, felt like an eerie isolation. A few moments later, a woman in a sharp business suit entered the lounge. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her expression was unreadable. Elon's eyes narrowed as he studied her from across the room. He didn't know why, but something about her presence made him uneasy. She wasn't just another passenger, that much was clear. He could tell by the way she carried herself, too confident, too purposeful. She made her way over to him without hesitation, her heels clicking on the tile floor as she walked. When she reached his seat, she stopped and looked down at him. "Elon Musk," she said, her voice cold but polite. "I've been waiting to speak with you." Elon's heart skipped a beat. There was something unsettling about her, something that didn't sit right. His instinct told him she wasn't just another airport official or curious traveler. "Who are you?" Elon asked, keeping his tone even but sharp. "I'm someone who can help you," she replied. "I'm not here to cause trouble. In fact, I'm here to prevent it." Elon raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his seat, not sure if he should trust her. "Help me?" "You're going to have to explain that one." She sat down across from him without asking, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made him feel as though she were reading his every thought. "You're in deeper than you realize, Mr. Musk. The group targeting you, they're not just a threat to you. They're a threat to everything you've built. And they have people everywhere. Not just in the shadows, but right under your nose." Elon's suspicion only grew. "What do you mean by everywhere? Who are you working for?" "I'm working for myself," she said, her lips curling into a faint smile. "I've been watching them for a long time. Their reach is far. They've infiltrated multiple industries, governments, and even tech companies like yours. They've been plotting this for years, but now, they've taken it to the next level." Elon sat up straighter. "What's the next level?" "They've sent a message by disrupting your flight, by making it impossible for you to continue your journey. It's just the beginning. They want to destabilize your businesses, embarrass you, and prevent your plans for Mars from becoming a reality." Elon's mind raced. This woman's words were ringing true. The flight incident, Jenna's warnings, and the cryptic threats, it was all beginning to connect. "Why now?" Elon asked, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in his head. "Why this sudden attack?" "Because they can," she said simply. "Because you've become too successful, too influential. The more you push forward, the more they see you as a threat to their control. You've been on their radar for years, but now, you've made it impossible for them to ignore you. They're not just going to sit back and let you change the world." Elon felt a surge of anger. He had spent his entire life building these companies, working tirelessly to change the world for the better. And now, someone was trying to take it all away. He wasn't going to let that happen. Not now, not ever. "What do I need to do?" Elon asked, his voice low, resolute. The woman studied him for a moment before replying, her eyes calculating. "You need to stop running. Stop playing by their rules. The moment you try to play nice, you lose. The moment you give them the control they want, you lose. This is a fight for your life, for the future of everything you're working for. But there's a way to fight back." Elon's heart pounded. "How?" She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I have information that can help you take down the people behind this. But it's not going to be easy. They're everywhere, and they won't hesitate to destroy anyone who stands in their way." Elon stared at her, trying to gauge whether he could trust her. He wasn't sure why, but he felt she was telling the truth. Something about her was different from the others he had encountered, her confidence, her determination. "You have to act fast," she continued, her voice urgent. "Time is running out. They're going to strike again, and this time, it's going to be worse. You're on their radar, Mr. Musk. You're the next target." Elon stood up abruptly, his mind already racing with possibilities. "What's your name?" "Rachel," she said, standing as well. "And I'm the only one who can help you. But you need to be prepared to make some tough choices." Before Elon could say anything else, Rachel turned and walked toward the exit, disappearing into the terminal. Elon stood there, his thoughts churning. She was right about one thing. Time was running out. As Elon made his way back to the gate, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and looked at the screen. It was a message from an unknown number. Meet me at gate 12 in 20 minutes. It's time to take action. Elon's eyes narrowed. This was it. He was going to confront this head-on. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and he wasn't about to let anyone, especially not a shadowy cabal of powerful individuals, stand in his way. He made his way toward gate 12, his mind focused on the task ahead. Whatever it took, he would do it. This was his future on the line. And he wasn't about to let anyone take it from him. The airport's terminal was growing quieter as the night stretched on. A few passengers wandered to their gates, but most had settled in for the night, oblivious to the unfolding drama behind the scenes. Elon made his way to gate 12, every step deliberate and filled with purpose. The mystery of the message was still fresh in his mind. Who had sent it? And what exactly was waiting for him at this gate? As he approached the gate, the area seemed unusually empty. No one was around, except for a solitary man sitting in the far corner, his head bowed as if waiting. The man's appearance was unremarkable, wearing a simple jacket and jeans, he could have blended in with any other traveler. But there was something about his posture, his stillness, that made Elon pause. Elon's instincts screamed at him to be cautious. This was a trap. But he had no choice. The stakes had escalated far beyond just a flight disruption. If what Jenna had said was true, and everything pointed to it being true, this was no longer just about a conspiracy, this was about survival. He approached the man slowly, keeping his distance. As he neared, the man looked up and gave him a slight nod, almost as if expecting him. Elon Musk, the man said, his voice low and steady. I've been waiting for you. Elon's gaze hardened, his mind racing. Who are you? The man stood up and smiled faintly, offering a handshake. Name's James. I work with Rachel. She asked me to meet you here. Elon didn't take his hand. Instead, he crossed his arms, studying James carefully. Something about this guy didn't sit right with him. His demeanor was calm, too calm, for someone in the middle of a tense situation like this. What's going on? Why am I here? Elon demanded, his patience running thin. James didn't seem bothered by the sharpness in Elon's voice. He gestured toward a nearby bench, inviting him to sit. There's a lot you need to understand, Mr. Musk. What you're dealing with isn't just some corporate sabotage or political maneuver. This goes far deeper than you realize. These people, they've been planning this for decades. Elon's brow furrowed. Who are these people? And what do they want with me? James took a seat on the bench and looked directly at Elon, his expression suddenly serious. They're the ones who control everything. The ones who've been pulling the strings behind the scenes, politicians, billionaires, media moguls, tech giants. They're the ones who want to dictate what happens in this world, and you're a threat to that. You've been building something that they can't control, something that could change everything. Elon's pulse quickened. You're saying that they've been controlling everything? For how long? Longer than you think, James said with a sigh. You're not the first visionary to run into them. And you won't be the last. They see you as a wild card, someone who could disrupt their carefully constructed system. But that's exactly why they've come after you. Elon's mind was working overtime. Rachel, Jenna, and now this man, everything was converging into a single point. This wasn't just about a business move or a personal vendetta, this was about power, control, and the future. His future. So what's the plan? Elon asked, his voice firm now. How do I stop them? James leaned back, his eyes narrowing slightly. That's where things get complicated. You're not just dealing with a group of rich and powerful people. You're dealing with an organization that has infiltrated every corner of society. They have resources, connections, and the kind of influence that's almost impossible to fight. But you have something they don't, vision. You see the future in ways they never could, and that's why you're a threat. Elon stared at him, his mind whirling. He was starting to understand the magnitude of what he was facing, but there was still so much uncertainty. So, what's next? What's the first step? James took a deep breath, his gaze darkening. The first step is recognizing the danger, but it's also about making a choice. You have to decide what you're willing to sacrifice. They won't stop until they've destroyed everything you've built. And if you don't act now, they'll have you where they want you, cornered and powerless. Elon stood, feeling a surge of adrenaline. He wasn't going to let this happen. He had spent his life fighting for a better future, for Mars, for electric cars, for humanity's progress, and he wasn't going to let anyone take that away from him. I'm not backing down, Elon said, his voice unwavering. They've underestimated me. I'm going to fight, and I'm going to win. James stood as well, looking at Elon with a mixture of admiration and caution. That's the spirit. But remember, this fight isn't just about you. It's about everyone who believes in what you're doing. If you want to win, you need to make sure you have the right allies. People you can trust. People who want the same future as you. Elon's mind flashed back to Jenna's warning, and his gut told him James was right. Allies were crucial. This wasn't a war he could fight alone. I've already got one ally, Elon said, his tone resolute. Now, I just need to figure out who else is on my side. James nodded. Be careful who you trust. And whatever you do, don't let them see you coming. They'll use everything in their power to take you down before you even have a chance to fight back. As James turned and began to walk toward the exit, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation, this moment, had changed everything. The world he thought he knew, full of problems, yes, but also full of opportunity, had just shifted. This wasn't just a business challenge. This was a battle for control of the future itself. He turned and walked toward the airport's exit, determined to continue his fight. Whatever came next, he was ready. Elon paced around his private office at SpaceX, the walls lined with cutting-edge technology and models of rockets that seemed to promise the future. The night's events were still fresh in his mind, James' warning, Rachel's cryptic message, and the constant feeling that a shadow was looming over him, growing larger by the minute. His pulse had barely settled from the tension of the airport, and his mind couldn't stop racing. There were so many questions, and for the first time, Elon didn't have all the answers. His fingers hovered over his desk, unsure of what to do next. The pieces were there, but the puzzle was still incomplete. The more he learned, the more complicated everything became. Powerful figures. A shadowy organization. A hidden network of influence controlling everything from politics to business. And he was the target. His phone buzzed, breaking his train of thought. The name on the screen made his heart skip a beat. Jenna. Hey, Elon answered quickly, trying to sound more composed than he felt. Elon, it's happening, Jenna's voice crackled through the phone. I don't know how much longer we have before they come for you again. Things are escalating fast. We need to move, and we need to do it now. Elon's grip on the phone tightened. What do you mean? What's happening? I've been digging into the group Rachel mentioned. The connections are deeper than we thought. They've infiltrated your companies, Elon. People you trust are part of this, and they're watching your every move. They're planning something bigger, something that could destroy everything you've built in an instant. Elon's stomach twisted. He had suspected there were moles within his organizations, but hearing it from Jenna confirmed his worst fears. He had always prided himself on building loyal teams, he never imagined there could be someone inside, working against everything he stood for. Who? Elon asked, his voice tight with suspicion. Who's involved? I don't know yet, Jenna admitted. But the next few hours are critical. You need to get out of there. Don't trust anyone. Not even your closest allies. They'll be coming for you soon, and you have to be ready. A chill ran down Elon's spine. They'll be coming for you soon, those words were a stark reminder of the danger he was facing. But there was no time to be afraid. His mind was already shifting into problem-solving mode, calculating his next move. All right, I'm leaving now, he said, his tone firm. I'll get to the safe house. You'll be with me soon, right? I'm already in motion. Just stay safe, Elon, Jenna replied, her voice strained with urgency. Don't let them corner you. Trust no one. Elon disconnected the call and stood still for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle. Trust no one. That was easier said than done, especially when his empire was filled with people he had worked with for years, people he considered friends. But Jenna was right. If this group had infiltrated his companies, it meant that they had the resources to make him trust the wrong person at the wrong time. With a determined nod to himself, Elon grabbed his jacket and phone, heading for the door. He needed to move quickly, but strategically. The plan wasn't just to escape, it was to make sure he didn't leave any trace that would lead them straight to him. By the time Elon arrived at his car, his mind was already focused on the next steps. The garage was empty, the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights the only sound. He needed to go somewhere remote, somewhere safe. He couldn't risk using any of his usual routes, not now. He had to vanish into the background, like a ghost in the system. Elon pressed the button on his key fob, unlocking the car and sliding into the driver's seat. His hands gripped the wheel with intensity, his eyes scanning the rearview mirror every few seconds. The roads ahead felt like an open expanse, a place where he could finally get a moment to think, but the nagging feeling of being pursued didn't leave him. It wasn't just about escaping, this was about winning. If he didn't act decisively, they would take everything from him. He needed allies. But who could he trust? Rachel's words rang in his mind. You need to make sure you have the right allies. People you can trust. People who want the same future as you. He didn't have the luxury of waiting to find out who was truly on his side. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. But he couldn't do it alone. Jenna was right. Every move had to be calculated, and he needed a network, something that wasn't just reliant on his immediate circle of trusted people. The car roared to life as he pulled out onto the road, heading toward the one place he knew he could find some form of clarity, the SpaceX headquarters. He'd need to check in with his most trusted executives, people who had been there from the beginning. If there were any signs of sabotage, they would know. But even that felt risky. How deep did the infiltration go? Hours later, Elon arrived at SpaceX's headquarters. The moon was high in the sky, its silver light casting shadows over the sleek buildings. It was eerily quiet in the parking lot, the usual bustle of employees and engineers gone for the night. But the building was still lit up, a beacon of innovation and progress, a sharp contrast to the feeling of paranoia that had settled in Elon's chest. He entered through the side door, avoiding the main entrance. The halls were dimly lit, and the silence was oppressive. Every step he took felt like a calculated risk. He was about to face the very people he had built this company with, but was he really in control anymore? Inside, he made his way to the war room, a conference room that had become an iconic part of SpaceX's history. There, he could formulate a plan. There, he could figure out what came next. As he approached the door, he froze. The faintest sound reached his ears, the click of a door opening, followed by hushed voices. Elon's heart raced, and his hand instinctively went to his side, where he kept a concealed device. He wasn't sure who was on the other side of that door, but he had no intention of being caught off guard again. He pressed his back against the wall, his breath steadying as he strained to listen. The conversation on the other side was low, but the words were unmistakable. We have to act fast. Musk is a threat. We can't wait any longer. Elon's blood ran cold. It's happening now. He didn't know who was speaking, but there was no mistaking the intent in their voices. The game had changed. Elon's body tensed, the adrenaline surging through his veins. The conversation on the other side of the door was more than just a casual discussion. It was a plan. A plan to bring him down. He had no idea how many people were on the other side, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to walk into the lion's den unprepared. His mind raced. He could hear his breath quickening, but he forced himself to remain silent. Whoever was in the room, whatever they were plotting, he had to figure out how to stay one step ahead. He crouched lower against the wall, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Every muscle in his body screamed to act, but he knew impulsive action would lead to disaster. He had to wait. He had to outsmart them. The conversation continued, the words piercing through the door with a chilling clarity. "We can't afford to give Musk time to react," one voice said, its tone sharp and confident. "The moment he figures out what we're doing, it'll be too late. He's a visionary, but he's not prepared for this level of betrayal. We have the upper hand now." Elon clenched his jaw, anger bubbling to the surface. Betrayal. It wasn't just about business anymore, it was personal. They were playing with the lives of everyone in his orbit, and he wasn't going to stand by while they destroyed everything he believed in. "What about the others?" another voice asked, hesitant but clearly concerned. "What if they find out we've been using them?" "Don't worry about the others," the first voice responded. "This is bigger than just us. We're doing what's necessary. Musk won't know what hit him." Elon's mind was a blur of thoughts. These people had infiltrated his companies, his life. They had been inside the very heart of his empire, manipulating the game from the shadows. He had been a target, and he hadn't even seen it coming. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and Elon's heart skipped a beat. Someone was coming toward the door. He didn't have much time. His pulse was pounding in his ears, but his instincts were sharper than ever. He couldn't hesitate anymore. He had to move. In a flash, Elon ducked into a nearby storage room, just as the door to the war room creaked open. He held his breath, his back pressed against the cold concrete wall as the figures passed by. The shadows of two men moved across the hallway, their voices low, but unmistakable. "Make sure the plan is ready. Musk's next move will be critical. We can't afford any mistakes," one of them said. Elon strained to hear, his mind racing. "They know my next move." They were planning to shut him down before he even had a chance to act. He waited until their footsteps faded down the hallway before slipping out of the storage room. His mind was now focused with laser precision. He had to get to the core of the operation, the source of the betrayal, and take back control. With swift, purposeful strides, Elon made his way down the dimly lit corridor. His hand was steady as he reached for his phone. He dialed Jenna's number, his throat tight with urgency. "Jenna," he said as soon as she picked up. "I need you to track every move they're making. They're trying to trap me here at SpaceX. I'm going to need backup. I can't trust anyone else." "I'm already on it," Jenna's voice crackled through the line. "I've set up a secure network to monitor all communication from SpaceX's internal channels. Just get out of there, Elon. You need to leave now, before they know you're on to them." "I can't leave yet," he said, his voice hardening. "I need answers. I need to find the mole. If I don't, I'll never be able to trust anyone again. I'm not running." "Elon," Jenna's voice was urgent. "You don't have time for this. They're coming for you. You don't know who's already compromised. They've probably cut off your exits by now. You have to get to the safe house, now." "I can't," Elon insisted. "Not until I have the information I need." "Don't worry, I'll be fine." There was a long pause on the other end, a moment where the tension felt unbearable. Finally, Jenna spoke, her voice thick with concern. Just promise me you'll be careful. You're more than just a target, Elon. You're the future. Don't let them destroy everything. I promise, Elon said, his voice softer now. But deep down, he knew the stakes had never been higher. This was a game of survival, and he had no intention of losing. As he disconnected the call, Elon felt the weight of the situation settle in. He was walking into the heart of the enemy's territory, but he wasn't going to retreat. Not now. Not ever. The hallway was eerily quiet now, but Elon's mind was anything but. Every step he took toward the war room felt like a step deeper into the lion's den. He had to find the evidence. He had to expose the traitors who had been pulling the strings behind his back. If he could prove who was responsible, he could fight back with everything he had. As he neared the door to the war room, Elon spotted a small security camera overhead. He quickly ducked into a side corridor and pulled up the encrypted network Jenna had set up for him. With quick fingers, he typed in the code she had given him. A map of the building appeared on his screen, with live data about security personnel, locked doors, and possible exit routes. His eyes scanned the layout. The war room was 2 floors up. He had only minutes before they realized he was on the move. His mind flashed back to the conversation he had overheard earlier. Musk is a threat. They didn't know who they were dealing with. He wasn't just some CEO they could crush under their boot. He had built SpaceX from the ground up, and he would not let it be torn down by a few faceless traitors. With the map in hand, Elon moved toward the stairwell, determined to find the answers he needed. But just as he reached the door, his phone buzzed again. It was a message from Rachel. Elon, I don't know how to say this, but things are worse than we thought. They're coming for you, right now. Don't trust anyone. Not even me. Elon's heart skipped a beat. Rachel was in on this. She had to be. Everything was connected now, Jenna's warning, James' words, the conversations he had overheard, and now this message from Rachel. The pieces were falling into place. He had one chance. One chance to turn the tide. And it was happening now. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon's hands trembled as he stared at the message from Rachel. Don't trust anyone. Not even me. His mind reeled, struggling to make sense of what he was reading. He had believed in Rachel, trusted her with some of the most important decisions of his career. But now everything was in question. He took a deep breath and pocketed his phone, the weight of Rachel's words pressing heavily on him. Don't trust anyone. Not even his closest allies. The very people he had leaned on for years. It felt like his entire world was crumbling. But he knew one thing for sure, he couldn't afford to dwell on doubt right now. Every second mattered. He moved swiftly, retracing his steps through the labyrinth of SpaceX's headquarters. The plan was clear, find the mole. He had to discover who was pulling the strings behind the scenes, who had orchestrated the attack on him, and, more importantly, who wanted him gone. As he walked through the dimly lit hallways, his mind flickered between the possibilities. He had always known that his success would make him enemies. But to think that someone so close to him could betray him, it was a devastating blow. He reached the stairwell, where he had just a few moments to act before the building's security protocols would lock him inside. Elon's pulse quickened, the sound of his footsteps echoing off the cold concrete. He had to get to the server room. The answers were hidden there, files, communications, anything that could point him in the right direction. The stairwell led to the second floor. He moved quickly but quietly, checking the doors as he went. His gut told him to trust his instincts, to follow the trail wherever it led, even if it meant risking everything. As he approached the server room, he noticed something odd. The door, which was usually locked tight, was slightly ajar. His heart raced. This wasn't just a coincidence. Someone had been here recently, and it wasn't just a passing visitor. This was part of the plan. Someone had left it open intentionally, perhaps as a trap. Elon paused, staring at the crack in the door, his mind spinning with possibilities. Could they be waiting for him on the other side? Or was this his chance to strike first? He took a deep breath, pushed the door open slowly, and slipped inside. The room was bathed in the cold light of fluorescent tubes, the hum of servers filling the air. The metallic scent of the machinery lingered in the background, but it was the faint clicking sound of a keyboard that made him freeze. Someone was here. He peered around the corner of a server rack and spotted a figure hunched over the desk in the far corner of the room, the glow of the screen casting an eerie light across their face. Elon's stomach dropped. He recognized the silhouette immediately. It was James. His gut twisted with a mixture of shock and anger. James, the man he had trusted more than anyone. The one who had stood by his side from the beginning. The one who had always been there, through thick and thin. To see him in the server room, working alone at this hour, his actions now more suspect than ever, sent a cold shiver through Elon. But even as that realization dawned on him, Elon knew he couldn't act hastily. There was no definitive proof that James was the traitor. It could still be part of the larger plan. But the signs pointed to him. This could very well be the moment when everything changed. Elon's eyes scanned the room, looking for any sign of a trap, any indication that James had anticipated his arrival. The security footage? Was it erased? Had the mole already covered their tracks? James, Elon called, his voice steady but laced with tension. James looked up at the sound of his voice, startled but quickly masking it with a smile. Elon. Didn't expect to see you here. His voice was casual, but there was something off about it, something Elon couldn't quite place. I could say the same thing, Elon replied, his eyes narrowing. What are you doing in here, James? James shrugged, pushing the chair back from the desk and standing up slowly. Just checking on some things. You know how it is. Security updates, system diagnostics. Thought I'd get a head start on some routine maintenance. Elon wasn't buying it. The words sounded rehearsed, too smooth. At this hour? I don't think so. His eyes never left James' face. You've been in here before, haven't you? Long before I showed up. Something's not right. James' expression faltered for the briefest moment before he composed himself again, but it was enough for Elon to see the crack. He wasn't prepared for this confrontation. Elon, you've been under a lot of stress, James said, trying to deflect. Maybe you're reading too much into things. This is just. No, Elon interrupted sharply, his voice hardening. I'm not reading too much into anything. I've been under attack, James. The people I trusted, the people I built this company with, are trying to bring me down. And you, of all people, have been involved in it. Haven't you? The silence in the room grew heavy, each second stretching longer than the last. James didn't move, didn't speak, as if the truth had just been revealed to him in the most unforgiving light. But then, slowly, he straightened up, his face hardening into something colder, more calculating. You're right, James said, his voice now cold as ice. I've been involved. But not in the way you think. Elon's heart slammed against his chest. This wasn't how he'd expected it to go. He had suspected James, perhaps even feared him to some extent, but to hear him admit it so freely, it was a gut punch he hadn't prepared for. Why? Elon demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. Why, James? After everything we've been through? James stepped toward him, his eyes cold with a dangerous intensity. You're a visionary, Elon. But you're blind to the bigger picture. You think the world revolves around you and your ideas, but the reality is, people like me have to make sure you don't get too big for your own good. You've been a threat to more than just business. To the system. To the people who really run things. Elon's blood ran cold as the weight of James' words sank in. His best friend, his trusted ally, had been working against him all along, because he thought Elon was a threat to everything he had worked for. It wasn't just about money, or control, or business, it was about power. And James had chosen the side of those who would stop at nothing to take that power back. "You've been working with them?" Elon asked, his voice breaking slightly as the sting of betrayal took hold. "Of course," James said with a bitter smile. "You were never meant to be the one who changed everything. You were just the tool, Elon. And I was the one who kept you in check. But now it's time for the real players to take over." Elon took a step back, his mind reeling, his emotions at war with each other. He had never imagined that James, his most trusted confidant, could betray him like this. But the truth was staring him in the face. And there was no turning back now. "Then it's over," Elon said softly, his voice tinged with finality. "You chose your side. And now, I'm going to stop you." The words echoed in Elon's mind like a drumbeat. "You chose your side. And now, I'm going to stop you." He could feel the weight of his own statement, the bitterness of betrayal still sinking deep into his bones. James had been the person he trusted the most, the one who had always supported him in the darkest moments. And now, he stood on the other side, working with those who wanted to tear down everything Elon had built. But even as the shock of betrayal coursed through him, Elon knew this wasn't the time to lose himself in rage. This was the moment of reckoning. He had to take back control, expose the people behind James, and do what he did best, create a future that no one could take away from him. Elon took a slow breath, his hands still shaking from the intensity of the moment. He forced himself to focus. The server room was silent now, save for the hum of the machines, the harsh glow of the screens casting long shadows across the cold concrete floor. It felt like the calm before the storm. "I'm not leaving here empty-handed," Elon said, his voice low but resolute. "You're not going to walk away from this, James. Not after everything you've done." James tilted his head slightly, a dark smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. "You think you can stop me? You're alone in this fight, Elon. You're outnumbered, outclassed, and you've underestimated just how deep this goes." "I don't need to do it alone," Elon replied, his eyes narrowing as he moved toward the desk. "I've got people who are willing to fight for what's right. And that's something you'll never understand." James stepped forward, his posture tense. "You really think they'll help you? They're just pawns in a much bigger game. You've been played from the start, Musk. You were never the one in control." Elon didn't flinch. The bigger game, he had heard that phrase more times than he cared to count, from people who thought they could see things he couldn't. But every time they underestimated him, he had proven them wrong. He wasn't done yet. He turned to face James directly, his eyes locking onto his former allies. "If I've been played, then it's because you and your masters underestimated me too. This ends now." Suddenly, the sharp beep of an alarm cut through the air, followed by the screeching sound of metal doors slamming shut. Elon's heart skipped a beat. Lockdown. They had triggered the security system, there was no easy escape now. James didn't even flinch. "It's over, Elon. You're trapped." But Elon's mind was already working, already moving. If they thought locking him inside the building was going to stop him, they were wrong. He had been here before, he had outsmarted even the most sophisticated security systems, and this would be no different. He quickly pulled out his phone and sent a text to Jenna, the one person he knew he could still trust. "They've locked me in. I need a way out. Fast." Seconds later, Jenna's reply came in, "I've got eyes on the building. Wait for my signal." Elon's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay calm. The clock was ticking. The security system would only hold for so long, and once they knew he was awake to their betrayal, the stakes would be higher than ever. You think you've won, Elon said, turning back to James. But this is just the beginning. James stepped closer, his voice now laced with venom. You should have stayed out of it, Musk. You could have just kept pushing forward, doing your thing. But now. Now you're in the way. You're going to regret this. Elon stood his ground. Regret is for the weak. James lunged at him, but Elon was quicker. He sidestepped the attack, his body moving instinctively, the same way it always did when his back was against the wall. As James stumbled, Elon grabbed the nearby fire extinguisher and swung it toward him with all his might. James dodged just in time, but Elon didn't wait for him to recover. With a single, determined push, he shoved James into the nearest server rack, the sound of metal scraping against metal ringing in his ears. Listen to me, James, Elon said, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling around him. You've made a mistake. You think you can control everything, but that's not how this works. This company, this vision, this is bigger than any one person. You won't win. James straightened up, wiping a smear of blood from his lip. He was still grinning, but this time, the smile was tight with frustration. You're delusional, Musk. You think people like you and me are different, but we're not. In the end, it's all about power. Maybe for you, Elon said, but not for me. For me, it's about something more. Just as James prepared to launch another attack, the hum of the building shifted. The security alarms that had been blaring suddenly fell silent. A split second later, a voice crackled through the intercom system. This is Jenna. I've just overridden the lockdown. You've got 5 minutes. Get out now. Elon didn't hesitate. He pushed forward, grabbing James by the collar. You've got 2 choices. You can either stay here and face the consequences, or you can get out. I'm done with you. James' eyes flickered with a mix of rage and calculation, but there was no time for games anymore. With one last glare, he pulled himself free from Elon's grip and bolted for the door. Elon's pulse raced as he watched James disappear into the hallway. He knew James wasn't done, not by a long shot, but for now, this chapter had closed. The battle was far from over, but he had won this round. As the door slid open and Elon stepped into the hallway, he took a deep breath. The air felt different now. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing, he wasn't going to stop fighting. Not until he exposed the full extent of the conspiracy. Not until he proved that, in the end, the vision he had was worth more than the games of power others played. For the first time in what felt like forever, Elon felt a strange sense of clarity. He had been betrayed. He had been played. But he was still standing. And that was something no one could take away from him. The adrenaline still surged through Elon's veins as he moved quickly down the hallway, taking the tight corners with a practiced ease. The air felt colder than usual now, a chill not just from the temperature but from the realization of how deep the betrayal went. James had been right about one thing, Elon was alone in this fight, at least for now. But he wasn't about to stay that way. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him back to reality. It was Jenna. I've got eyes on the building. You're clear for now, but you need to lay low. I'm sending someone to help. Elon's eyes narrowed. He didn't want help. He didn't need anyone else to get dragged into this mess. But he had no choice. The war had escalated, and now it was more than just about surviving, it was about taking back control of everything he had built, piece by piece. Still, he couldn't shake the nagging thought that perhaps someone else could help him bring this conspiracy to light. Someone who knew the ins and outs of this world better than anyone else. And then, it hit him, someone who could be just the ally he needed, Richard. Richard Thompson was a former high-ranking executive at one of the largest aerospace companies in the world. He had the experience, the connections, and most importantly, the knowledge of the corporate world's underbelly. He had been the one to guide Elon through the early days of SpaceX when things seemed impossible. Their partnership had always been more of mutual respect than friendship, but lately, Richard had been keeping his distance. It was clear now, he had been playing his own game, perhaps for the same shadowy forces that James had aligned with. But there was no time for doubts. Elon needed answers. He quickly dialed Richard's number. The phone rang twice before it picked up. "Richard, it's Elon." There was a long pause on the other end before Richard's voice crackled through, tinged with something Elon couldn't quite place. "Elon, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. What's going on?" "I've been set up, Richard. Everything's falling apart, and I need your help." Another pause. "You're in deeper than I thought." Elon's grip tightened on the phone. He wasn't used to sounding desperate, but this time was different. "I know what's going on. I know you've been involved with the others. I need to know who's behind all of this. Who's pulling the strings?" Richard's tone shifted slightly, and Elon could sense a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "You're asking the wrong questions, Musk. They don't just want your company. They want control of everything you've built. If you're going to fight back, you need more than just knowledge, you need power. And not the kind you're used to." Elon's mind raced. Power. He had always believed in the power of innovation, the power of his vision. But what Richard was suggesting was something far more complex. Something darker. Power. What kind of power? Elon asked cautiously. "The kind that doesn't play by the rules," Richard replied. "The kind that gets you into rooms you've never been in, the kind that lets you talk to the people who can end this before it gets worse. But you're going to have to make some choices. Dangerous choices." Elon knew what that meant. He had always been a man of principle, but now, his principles would be tested in ways he never imagined. If he wanted to win this war, he would have to go beyond the boundaries of the rules he had always followed. The stakes were higher than they had ever been before. And he was ready to go to extremes. "I'll do whatever it takes," Elon said, his voice steady, filled with determination. Richard sighed, a sound of both resignation and understanding. "All right. Meet me at the usual spot in 2 hours. We'll talk strategy. But be careful, Elon. Once you step into this world, there's no turning back." 2 hours later, Elon found himself in the back of an inconspicuous black SUV, speeding toward a warehouse on the outskirts of town. The city's skyline was barely visible in the distance, the glow of lights flickering like stars in the night sky. As the vehicle pulled to a stop outside the nondescript building, Elon couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. This was it. The place where deals were made, where the most powerful figures in the world crossed paths in the shadows. He stepped out of the SUV, his boots clicking on the cracked pavement. Jenna's warnings echoed in his mind, but he couldn't afford hesitation. If this was the only way forward, then he would take it. Inside the warehouse, the air smelled of machinery and dust. The space was vast and dark, lit only by overhead lamps that cast long shadows across the concrete floor. Elon walked deeper into the building, his mind focused, every sense heightened. Richard was waiting for him near the back of the room, sitting at a table with a folder in front of him. He didn't rise as Elon approached, his eyes narrowed, studying Elon's every move. "Glad you could make it," Richard said. "I wasn't sure you would." Elon didn't smile. "I came because I don't have a choice." "What's the plan?" Richard slid the folder across the table. "This is everything. The names, the connections. It's all here. The people who've been manipulating you from the inside. The people behind James." Elon opened the folder carefully, his eyes scanning the documents. The information was overwhelming, names of high-profile politicians, CEOs, and shadowy figures in the military-industrial complex. These were the people who had been pulling the strings, the ones who thought they could control the future of humanity, who believed they could reshape the world in their image. "You didn't get this from me," Richard said, his voice tight. "It's dangerous, Elon. These people won't stop at anything to keep their secrets. You're playing with fire." Elon's jaw clenched. "I've been playing with fire my whole life, Richard. And I'm not stopping now." Richard's eyes softened for a moment, as though seeing a side of Elon he hadn't expected. "You're in deeper than you realize, Musk. There's no going back. Once you take this route, there's no turning off the path." Elon took a deep breath, his fingers brushing over the documents in front of him. He knew what he had to do. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be pretty. But it was the only way forward. "This ends now," Elon said quietly, his voice filled with a quiet fury. "I'll burn down everything they've built, and I'll rebuild it my way. This is my fight now." As he left the warehouse, the weight of the decision hung heavy on his shoulders. But there was no turning back now. The game had changed, and so had he. Elon knew one thing with absolute certainty: if he was going to take on the people who were trying to destroy him, he was going to have to fight smarter, harder, and with everything he had. The battle had just begun. The drive back from the warehouse felt different. Elon's mind churned with the enormity of what he had just seen. The documents Richard had handed him were more than just names and connections, they were the map to a labyrinth of power, manipulation, and control. People he thought he knew, people who had been by his side, were part of something much larger. The shadows that loomed over his empire were deeper and more tangled than he had ever imagined. His phone buzzed in his pocket again. This time, it was from Jenna. "I've been tracking their movements. The people you're up against, they've got eyes everywhere. It's time to make your move, but you need to be careful. The closer you get, the more dangerous it becomes." Elon's grip tightened around the steering wheel. He could feel the tension in the pit of his stomach. Every move from here on out had to be calculated, precise. He wasn't just trying to protect his companies anymore, he was trying to protect his vision for the future. And in the process, he had to expose the rot from within, the corruption that had been festering for too long. His destination now was a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. An old, decaying office complex, easily overlooked, but one that held a critical piece of the puzzle. Elon had learned through Richard's intel that this was where some of the most powerful players met in secret, away from the prying eyes of the public and the media. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. This was it. The beginning of the end. As Elon arrived, the place was just as unremarkable as he had imagined, windows blacked out, graffiti on the walls, and a general air of neglect. But it was here that the people he was up against gathered. This was their base of operations, hidden in plain sight. He stepped out of the car, his heart beating in his chest. The door to the building creaked open as he approached, a sharp contrast to the stillness of the night. Inside, the dim glow of flickering fluorescent lights illuminated a room full of men and women in sharp suits. They sat around a long, polished table, murmuring in hushed tones. They didn't look up when Elon entered, as if they were expecting him. "Nice of you to join us, Elon," a voice rang out, cold and calculating. Elon's eyes locked onto the man who spoke, Richard's former mentor, Marcus Dalton. He was an enigma, a man who had always operated behind the scenes but wielded power like a puppet master. The same man who had likely orchestrated everything from the beginning. "You," Elon said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You've been pulling the strings all along, haven't you?" Marcus smiled, his expression almost sympathetic. "I didn't want it to come to this, Elon. But you pushed too hard. You didn't realize that the world you're trying to build doesn't fit into the narrative we've been crafting for years. You're a threat to that narrative. You don't get to decide what the future looks like," Elon snapped. "I do. I built this from nothing. And I'll burn it all down if I have to." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Is that a threat, Elon? Or a promise?" Elon stepped forward, his stance firm. You're not going to win. You've already lost. There was a long silence as Marcus studied Elon with cold eyes. The others at the table remained silent, watching the exchange with a detached interest. You really think you can take us down? Marcus finally asked. You're nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game. All this time, you've been playing by our rules without even knowing it. Elon's jaw clenched. Not anymore. The room seemed to grow colder as Marcus leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. We've been watching you, Elon. All your moves. Every step you've taken. You're not the genius you think you are. You've been playing checkers when we've been playing chess. Elon could feel the weight of his words, but there was no fear. Not anymore. The truth was out now, and he had a choice: either he could continue to fight against the inevitable or he could do something even bigger, something that would shake the very foundations of the world they were trying to control. You're right about one thing, Elon said, his voice hard. You've been controlling the game. But I'm done playing by your rules. Marcus' smile faltered, just for a moment, before it returned, wider, more unsettling. I think you'll find that you don't have much of a choice. You're too deep in. Too far gone. I'm not afraid of you, Elon said, his eyes never leaving Marcus' cold, calculating gaze. I never have been. The tension in the room was palpable, the stakes higher than ever. Elon could feel the weight of the decision he was about to make. The game was no longer just about him and Marcus. It was about the world. And for the first time in a long while, Elon Musk understood the gravity of what he was fighting for. Suddenly, the door behind him creaked open, and Elon tensed, ready for whatever came next. The shadow of a figure appeared, tall and imposing. As the figure stepped into the light, Elon's heart skipped a beat. It was Richard. Thought you could use some backup, Richard said, his tone flat but sincere. Elon turned, surprised, but grateful. He didn't know what had changed, but in that moment, Richard's loyalty felt more real than ever. I didn't think you'd be here, Elon said, his voice low, a mix of disbelief and determination. You were right. I wasn't as far out as I made you think. I've been playing my own game too. And now, I'm on your side, Richard replied, a slight hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Marcus' expression darkened as he surveyed the new development. You think you can win this fight, Musk? You think you can take me down with Richard by your side? You're too late. You've already lost. Elon looked him dead in the eye. We'll see about that. The war for the future was just beginning. The air in the room was thick with tension, every breath feeling like a small battle. Elon's mind was racing, but his body remained still, every muscle coiled tight, every sense focused. He knew this was the critical moment, the tipping point. The silence between him and Marcus stretched out, each second more unbearable than the last. The game had shifted, and now, the stakes were higher than ever. Elon stood his ground, his gaze locked with Marcus's cold, calculating eyes. Richard stood by his side, his presence a reminder that Elon was not alone in this fight. The man who had once been an ally to Marcus now shared Elon's purpose. The room was filled with anticipation, the air humming with the weight of decisions yet to be made. You're making a mistake, Musk, Marcus finally broke the silence, his voice low and deliberate. You have no idea what you're really up against. This isn't just some corporate takeover. This is the foundation of the system you're trying to fight. You think you can just walk in and dismantle it? You're nothing more than a small cog in a much bigger machine. Elon's jaw clenched, but he didn't flinch. He had heard these threats before, but this time, they didn't carry the same weight. He wasn't just a businessman anymore, he was a man who had seen through the facade, who knew what was at stake, and who was willing to do whatever it took to expose the truth. I'm not just trying to dismantle something, Elon replied, his voice steady but with an edge. I'm trying to free the future from people like you. People who think they control everything, who think they can manipulate the world's destiny for their own gain. Marcus's lips curled into a smug smile. You're a dreamer, Musk. You've always been. But you don't understand what happens when you disrupt the balance. You'll regret this. You'll lose everything. Elon's eyes narrowed. Maybe, but I'll never regret fighting for what's right. There was a moment of silence, a heavy pause that seemed to hang in the air. It was clear that Marcus had underestimated him. The facade of control that had always been a part of Marcus's demeanor was cracking, just slightly, but it was enough. Elon could see it in his eyes. Marcus was starting to doubt. We'll see how long that resolve lasts, Marcus said quietly, turning away. You think you're in control now, but you're playing a game you'll never win. With that, he made his way toward the door, signaling for the others in the room to follow. For a brief second, Elon's heart pounded in his chest, unsure if he had made the right move. But then Richard spoke, his voice calm but full of conviction. This is it, Elon. They're on the run. They're scared. Elon didn't respond immediately. Instead, he watched Marcus disappear into the shadows of the building, his mind already racing ahead, planning their next steps. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Elon finally said, his voice steady. We're just getting started. The next few days were a blur of activity. Elon and Richard worked relentlessly, preparing for the next phase of their plan. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. They had the evidence now, the proof of the conspiracy that had been lurking beneath the surface, and they needed to bring it to the world. Every moment felt like they were running out of time, like the walls were closing in on them. But no matter how hard they pushed, the media was quick to spin the narrative. Elon's name was plastered across headlines with accusations of insider trading, corruption, and even illegal activities. They had anticipated this. Their enemies would stop at nothing to destroy his credibility, to turn public opinion against him. And they were succeeding. Elon sat in his office late one night, the glow of his computer screen casting a cold light across his face. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to release the damning evidence that would bring everything into the open. But then, his phone buzzed with an incoming call from Richard. Elon, you need to see this. Richard's voice was grim when he answered. It's already started. Elon's stomach dropped as he braced himself for the worst. He looked at the tablet Richard had handed him, and his eyes immediately locked onto the headline. Elon Musk accused of insider trading, federal investigation underway. The words burned into his mind, the weight of the accusation hanging heavily. The media was already turning the tide, spinning their own version of events, positioning Elon as the villain in a much larger drama. They're going after you, Elon, Richard said, his voice tinged with frustration. This is exactly what we were worried about. They're framing you for something you didn't do. Elon could feel the cold weight of the situation. This wasn't just a smear campaign, it was a full-fledged assault. His enemies weren't just trying to take him down professionally. They were trying to destroy him personally. Elon's mind raced. He knew this wasn't the end, but it was a critical moment. They had to act fast, and they had to act with precision. There could be no mistakes. We can't let them control this narrative, Elon said, his voice tight but determined. We expose everything. Now. Richard nodded. We have the documents. We've got the evidence they're trying to bury. We just need to get it to the right people. Elon stood up, his eyes fixed on the screen. Then we do it now. It's time to show the world who's really behind all of this. The plan was set into motion. With the evidence in hand, they contacted a few trusted journalists, individuals who had no stake in the corporate wars and who were committed to the truth. Elon knew this was risky. Once the information was out, there was no going back. But the risks didn't matter anymore. Not when the world needed to know the truth. As the night wore on, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The road ahead was uncertain, and there was no guarantee of success. But there was one thing he was sure of: he had made his choice, and there was no turning back. For the first time, he understood the true weight of the fight he had taken on. This wasn't just a battle for his companies. It was a battle for everything he believed in. As the news outlets began to pick up the story, Elon watched the coverage unfold on his screen. His heart raced, his palms sweaty. But beneath it all, there was an undeniable surge of adrenaline. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something far greater than himself. This was the beginning of the end for Marcus and his conspiracy. But it was also the beginning of a new chapter for Elon Musk, and for the world. The storm had begun. The next few days were a whirlwind of media frenzy, legal battles, and whispered conversations behind closed doors. Elon and Richard knew that the hard work was just beginning, and it was only going to get more intense from here. Every step they took to expose the conspiracy only seemed to escalate the pressure they were under. But there was no turning back now. Elon was no longer just fighting for his companies or for his reputation, he was fighting for the truth. In the hours after the news broke, Elon had been inundated with messages, calls, and requests for interviews. His team had scrambled to put together a public response. But Elon wasn't ready to speak just yet. He needed to focus on the next phase of their plan: how to keep the pressure on Marcus and his allies without giving them any room to maneuver. Marcus is going to fight back harder now, Richard said one morning as they sat in Elon's office, looking over the latest media reports. He's not going to sit back and let this play out. We need to prepare for the worst. Elon nodded, his eyes fixed on the news feed. The accusations were everywhere now, his name was synonymous with scandal. But there was something else, too. Despite the barrage of negative press, there were still whispers of support. People were starting to question the timing of the accusations. Questions were being asked about the source of the investigation. And, most importantly, there were leaks from within Marcus's own camp, slips of information that suggested the conspiracy was even bigger than anyone had imagined. We keep moving forward, Elon said firmly. We don't give them any breathing room. We need to push these leaks into the public eye, expose everything. We'll let the truth speak for itself. Richard was silent for a moment, processing the strategy. It's risky, he finally said, looking up. Once we go public with everything, there's no going back. You'll be a target for life. Elon's face hardened. I've been a target since the day I stepped into the public eye. This is different. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about exposing the people who have been pulling the strings in the dark for far too long. Over the next few days, Elon and Richard continued to dig deeper, following the trail of evidence they had painstakingly compiled. The more they uncovered, the more complex the conspiracy became. It was no longer just about corporate espionage or insider trading, it was a sprawling web of corruption that reached into the highest echelons of government, finance, and tech. They discovered secret deals with multinational corporations, offshore accounts, and backroom deals that stretched across continents. Marcus and his allies had manipulated everything from stock markets to national policies. But it was the connections to political figures that shocked Elon the most. These were the people who had been quietly shaping the future for decades, using their influence to push through legislation that benefited only a select few. Elon wasn't naive. He knew exposing these people would have consequences. But the alternative was allowing them to continue their unchecked reign. He couldn't live with that. As the investigation unfolded, the pressure mounted. Marcus's retaliation came in the form of media attacks, legal threats, and financial pressure. But Elon and Richard had anticipated this. They remained one step ahead, leaking key pieces of evidence to trusted journalists, all while carefully dodging the traps set for them. The world was watching. Then, one night, Elon got a call that would change everything. It was Jenna. She had been quiet for weeks, busy with her own work and family, but she was back in the picture now, and her voice was steady but urgent. "Elon, you need to hear this. It's about Marcus," she said, her words clipped with a sense of urgency. "I've been talking to some people. There's a leak in Marcus's camp, a big one. It's the last piece of the puzzle. If you expose this, you'll have everything you need to take him down." Elon's heart raced. "What's the leak?" Jenna paused. "It's not just about Marcus. It's about his backers, people you wouldn't believe. They're pulling the strings behind the scenes, and they're connected to some very dangerous people. I've got the names, the proof, everything. But you need to be careful. If you go public with this, there will be no going back." Elon's mind was spinning. This was the break they had been waiting for, but it also brought a flood of new risks. "What's your plan?" "I've set up a meeting with someone on the inside. They'll give you the full dossier, all the connections. But you need to act fast. Once this gets out, Marcus will do whatever it takes to stop you." Elon didn't hesitate. "I'll be there. Tell me when and where." The meeting was set for the next evening at an undisclosed location. Elon and Richard arrived early, their nerves taut with anticipation. The risks of this meeting were enormous. If Marcus or his associates caught wind of it, everything could be over. But Elon had no choice. The truth needed to come out. When they entered the dimly lit conference room, they were met by a familiar face, one of Marcus's former associates who had gone underground. The man's face was gaunt, his eyes wild with fear. He was sweating, his hands shaking as he handed over a sealed folder. "These are the connections," the man said in a hushed voice, his eyes darting around nervously. "The people Marcus answers to, they're not just businessmen. They're deeply entrenched in political corruption. I've risked everything to get this to you. You need to expose them before it's too late." Elon took the folder, his heart hammering in his chest. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. The moment of reckoning had arrived. He opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. As he did, he could feel the weight of the information pressing down on him. The names, the connections, the undeniable proof that Marcus and his allies were far more dangerous than he had imagined. Elon looked up at Richard, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "It's all here." Richard nodded. "We have them. Now we expose them." Elon stood, his fingers gripping the folder tightly. "We do this now. We take down the whole system." As they left the meeting, Elon felt the gravity of the moment. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was a war against a corrupt system that had infiltrated every aspect of the world's power. The future was on the line, and Elon Musk wasn't going to let it slip through his fingers. The weight of the information Elon now held in his hands was more profound than he could have imagined. As he and Richard made their way back to the safety of their secure location, the walls of their world seemed to close in. Every move they made now had to be calculated. Every word, every action, carried the potential to either expose the truth or doom them to silence. The world was about to be rocked, and they knew the fallout would be immense. "Everything changes now," Richard said, breaking the tense silence as they entered their temporary headquarters. His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "The second we release this information, there's no going back. Marcus will come after you with everything he's got." Elon nodded, his mind still processing the damning files. He felt the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders, but something deeper was stirring inside him, determination, a sense of justice that pushed him forward. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Elon replied, his voice quiet but firm. "This is bigger than me. This is bigger than any one person or company. If I let them get away with this, then what kind of future are we even building?" The room grew still as Richard looked at him, understanding the gravity of what Elon was about to do. There was no telling what would happen next, but they both knew they had crossed a point of no return. Elon stared at the folder on the desk. It was more than just a pile of documents, it was the key to unmasking the powerful players behind the corruption. It was a road map to tearing down the conspiracy that had been silently shaping the world for decades. But it was also dangerous. Those who held the power had proven they would do anything to maintain it. Marcus and his backers wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone who stood in their way. "Do we have the media on our side?" Elon asked, looking up at Richard, his mind already racing through the logistics of getting the information out there. "We have some, but we can't trust anyone fully. We've got to move fast and be careful. If Marcus has anyone left in the media or law enforcement, we'll need to find them first and make sure they don't intercept it. The people we can trust are already in position, but they won't be able to stop everything," Richard replied. "The real danger isn't just Marcus. It's the network of people who are too deeply entrenched in the system to let this slide." Elon knew Richard was right. It wasn't just Marcus they were up against now. It was a web of corruption, a silent, sprawling empire of power that stretched across governments, corporations, and financial systems. The second they went public, Marcus and his allies would throw everything at them to prevent the truth from coming to light. "I know what we're up against," Elon said quietly. "But I also know the truth can't be hidden forever. We'll make sure it gets out." Richard nodded, but the tension in his posture remained. They were about to step into a dangerous game where even one wrong move could cost them everything. The hours ticked by in an almost suffocating silence as Elon and Richard worked together, coordinating the release of the information. They carefully crafted a series of public documents, press releases, and interviews designed to ensure that nothing could be dismissed as a hoax or a smear campaign. Every detail was scrutinized. Every name, every transaction, and every connection was carefully verified to make sure it was undeniable. It was nearly 2 a.m. when they were finally ready. The press release was set, and everything was in place. Elon took a deep breath and, with one final look at Richard, pressed send. The next few hours were a blur. As the documents hit the press, the world began to wake up to the truth. Headlines exploded across the news feeds, digital outlets, and social media. Words like corruption, secret deals, and political conspiracy spread like wildfire. The magnitude of the revelations was staggering. And then, the bombshell dropped. A video surfaced, a recording from one of Marcus's closest allies, implicating him directly in a series of criminal activities. It was the proof the world needed to fully understand the depth of the conspiracy. The video was raw, unedited, and irrefutable. Marcus's smirking face, caught in the act of making deals with international criminals, was now in the hands of the public. The world didn't know what hit it. Within hours, government officials, law enforcement agencies, and global watchdog groups began to mobilize. Investigations were launched. Political figures who had once been untouchable were now scrambling to distance themselves from Marcus. The pressure on him grew exponentially, and it was clear that the empire he had built over the years was crumbling, piece by piece. But it wasn't just Marcus who was feeling the heat. Elon was now the center of the storm. As the media turned its focus to him, the questions began pouring in. Was he the hero or the villain in this story? Had he known all along? Was he a whistleblower or a part of the problem? Elon had prepared for this. He didn't have time for explanations. The truth was already out, and now it was up to the world to decide. The phone calls began almost immediately. The first came from Jenna. "Elon, it's happening," she said, her voice a mixture of awe and concern. "The world is waking up. The people you've been fighting against, they're panicking." "I know," Elon replied, leaning back in his chair. "It's exactly what I expected. But the hard part is still ahead. We need to stay ahead of them, and we need to keep pushing. We've only just begun to scratch the surface." "You're right," Jenna agreed. "But just be careful. Marcus has allies everywhere. They won't let this go quietly." "I know. And I'm ready for it," Elon said. We've exposed the core of the system. Now, it's time to dismantle the rest. The following days were a blur of meetings, media interviews, and growing pressure from all sides. The truth was no longer something to be ignored, it was out there, and the world was changing in response. But it wasn't just a public spectacle, it was a movement. People were rallying to the cause, demanding accountability, calling for transparency in governments and corporations alike. But behind the scenes, Marcus and his associates were making their move. Elon sat at his desk, watching as new reports came in. The pressure was mounting, but there was something else now, an undeniable sense of urgency. He knew they were close to the endgame. Marcus had nowhere to hide. The world was closing in, and so was the conspiracy that had held it all together for so long. But would they win in the end? As the world held its breath, Elon braced for what was next. The days that followed the release of the bombshell documents felt like a blur. The world was no longer the same. The seismic shift in the power structures of politics, business, and media was palpable, and everyone was scrambling to either expose the truth or bury it. Elon's phone rang constantly, each call either a plea for comment or a warning from someone within the system telling him to be cautious. Jenna, Richard, and a handful of trusted allies were working tirelessly to keep ahead of Marcus and his network of powerful backers. But the web they had uncovered was vast, more intricate than anyone had expected. The deeper Elon dug into the information they had uncovered, the clearer it became, Marcus was not just a figurehead. He was a pawn in a much larger game, a game that reached the highest echelons of world power. Names he had never thought to connect, faces he had never imagined to be involved, were now at the forefront of the battle. And it was all falling apart. But not without consequences. That evening, Elon sat alone in his office, staring out over the sprawling city lights below. The weight of what was to come pressed heavily on his shoulders. There was no turning back now. He had exposed the heart of the conspiracy, and Marcus was about to make his next move. The pressure was palpable. He could feel the heat intensifying, the eyes of the world on him, the shadow of the fight looming just outside his window. Richard entered the room quietly, his face grim. "They're moving," Richard said, his voice low. "Marcus and his people are tightening their grip. We've been getting whispers, threats, indirect attacks. They're going to come after you. After all of us." Elon didn't flinch. He had expected this. The closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous it would become. But he had a purpose now, a drive that he hadn't felt before. He wasn't going to back down. "Tell me what we're up against," Elon replied, his voice steady. "There's a push to silence you, but it's more than that," Richard explained. "We've confirmed that Marcus has made calls to certain officials, trying to orchestrate a counternarrative. He's talking about a personal vendetta, painting you as the villain. Some media outlets are already running with that angle. He's also been meeting with some powerful tech players and some key people in Congress. He's desperate." Elon exhaled slowly, his fingers drumming against the desk. "We knew he'd fight back. The question is, how far will he go?" "I'm afraid he's willing to go all the way," Richard replied. "But there's one thing we have in our favor, the truth. No matter what Marcus does, the truth is out there now. There are too many people watching, too many people who want justice." Elon nodded. He knew Richard was right. The truth had already begun to take root in the world's consciousness. But Marcus wasn't someone who would just fade away quietly. He would fight with everything he had. Elon wasn't sure what form that fight would take, but he knew it wouldn't be pretty. The following morning, as the sun began to rise over the city, Elon received a call that sent a chill through his bones. It was from Jenna. "Elon, I need you to listen to me very carefully." Jenna's voice was tight, controlled, but laced with urgency. "Marcus is making a move. He's attempting to discredit you by framing this entire situation as a setup. He's planning to release something big, claiming that all the evidence we have is fabricated. It's going to look like a smear campaign. Elon's mind raced. What's his plan? He's setting up an entire narrative to make you look like the villain, Jenna continued. There's an interview scheduled with a journalist close to him, and they're going to show a video, an edited video, a fake one, that makes it look like you orchestrated the whole thing. Damn it, Elon muttered. He's going to try and spin the story. Is it already set up? Not yet, Jenna answered quickly. But you need to act fast. The video is scheduled to drop in the next 48 hours. If it goes public, it could completely ruin everything we've worked for. Elon's heart sank. The stakes had never been higher. If Marcus could pull this off, he could shift the public perception completely. Everything they had fought for, the truth, the exposure of the corruption, could be erased in a single stroke. How do we stop it? Elon asked, determination settling into his voice. Jenna paused for a moment before answering, her voice low. We need to get ahead of the narrative. We need to expose the video before it's released. We need the truth, Elon, and we need to make sure it's out there in the public eye first. I'm working on a way to get ahead of this, but we need your name cleared before the damage is done. Elon was already standing up, moving toward the door of his office. He grabbed his coat, feeling a sense of urgency that he hadn't felt before. We'll do it. We'll make sure the truth is louder than any lie they try to tell, he said. Make sure you're ready. I'm coming to meet you. The next few hours were filled with a sense of frenetic energy. Elon and Richard worked with their team, putting together the pieces to expose Marcus's manipulated video. They coordinated with their media contacts, ensuring that they could get their own footage out before the false narrative was launched. But the situation was becoming more and more dangerous. Marcus's people were trying to find ways to shut them down, pulling strings within the media, pressuring officials, and spreading false rumors. They were attempting to drown out the truth with lies. Elon knew this wasn't just a fight for his name anymore. It was a fight for everything he had built, and for the future of the world. He couldn't let Marcus win. He couldn't let a corrupt system continue to thrive under the guise of power and control. As he and Richard met with their team, Elon made a decision. They would not just respond to Marcus's attacks, they would go on the offensive. They would expose everything. We're not just going to fight this battle, Richard. We're going to end it. Once and for all, Elon said, his voice unwavering. The stage was set. The next 48 hours would determine everything. Marcus was making his move, but Elon had no intention of letting him win. The fight had only just begun, and Elon Musk was ready for the reckoning. The days leading up to the release of Marcus's fabricated video were a blur. The pressure was mounting with each passing hour, but Elon had no intention of sitting back and letting the narrative shift against him. He and Richard spent every waking moment preparing to take back control of the story, organizing press releases, lining up interviews, and leveraging their growing network of supporters to ensure their voices would be heard above the noise of Marcus's smear campaign. They couldn't afford to hesitate. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. Elon stared at his phone, watching as Marcus's manipulated video began to trend online. The media machine was in full motion, spreading lies, calling him a villain, painting him as the orchestrator of the very conspiracy he had exposed. It was a direct attack, one designed to tear down everything he had worked for. But Elon had known this would come. It was all part of the game. He had to outsmart Marcus and his network, expose the lies before they could fully take root in the public's mind. Elon, we're going live in 5, Richard's voice crackled over the speakerphone, snapping Elon out of his thoughts. Got it, Elon replied, his voice calm. He knew this moment would define everything. The press conference was set to be a game-changer. With the world's media gathered, Elon had one chance to clear his name and reveal the truth. The room was buzzing with anticipation as reporters shuffled in, their eyes trained on the podium where Elon would soon stand. The cameras clicked, and the world waited. Jenna was at his side, offering one last look of reassurance before the storm broke. "You've got this," she said. "Just stick to the facts. The truth is your shield." Elon nodded. He had prepared for this. The truth was undeniable, and no matter how many lies Marcus spread, it couldn't change the facts. He took a deep breath, adjusting his microphone as the crowd hushed. "Elon Musk, everyone," the host announced, ushering him onto the stage. The lights hit him, and the weight of the moment settled on his shoulders. But he wasn't afraid. He was ready. Elon stepped up to the podium, his gaze steady as he surveyed the room. The murmurs died down as he began to speak. "There's been a lot of noise over the past few days. A lot of lies and distortions about who I am and what I stand for," Elon began, his voice clear and commanding. "I know some of you have been wondering, did I orchestrate a smear campaign? Did I fabricate evidence? Did I lie to the world to cover up a conspiracy? The answer is simple, no." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle in. "I have never lied to you. The truth is out there. The documents I released, those were not fabricated. They were real. What you've seen in that video circulating online, that's not the truth. That's a distorted, edited version of reality, designed to shift the blame, to make me the villain. But here's the thing, they can't hide from the truth." The room was silent, every eye trained on him. Elon continued. "The truth is that there's a network of corruption that reaches the highest levels of power, and Marcus is at the center of it. I didn't make that system. I didn't build it. But I'm here to tear it down. I'm here to expose the rot, to make sure that the people who have been pulling the strings for too long face the consequences of their actions." He turned slightly, his eyes locking with the cameras, his voice unwavering. "I will not be silenced. I will not back down. And I will not let them get away with this. The lies they've been spreading, the fear they've been using to control you, it stops now." Elon knew he wasn't just talking to the people in the room. He was talking to the millions watching from their screens at home. This was his moment to clear his name and set the record straight. "We have the truth," he said. "We have the evidence. And with your help, we will bring those responsible for this conspiracy into the light." The crowd was hushed. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the click of cameras, the collective breath of reporters who were waiting for the fallout. Then, it came. The screens behind Elon flickered, and suddenly, a new video began to play. This one was different from Marcus's manipulated footage. It was raw. Unedited. The real footage that had been buried. It was a series of clips showing Marcus and his associates in secret meetings, discussing illegal activities, and making deals with criminals. The video was damning, and it hit like a sledgehammer. The truth was undeniable. Elon stood tall, allowing the video to speak for itself. His fingers gripped the podium as the footage continued to play, his heart racing with anticipation. He had done it. He had made sure the world would see the truth, no matter what Marcus tried to do. When the video ended, there was a stunned silence. The reporters stared, their faces reflecting the shock of what they had just witnessed. And then, the questions began. "Elon, how did you get this footage?" one reporter asked, voice shaking. "I've been working with trusted allies to ensure that the truth gets out," Elon responded, his tone steady. "We knew Marcus would try to cover it up, so we acted quickly to make sure nothing could stop this from reaching you." Another reporter asked, "What happens now? Will Marcus face charges?" Elon nodded. "The authorities are already involved. Investigations are underway, and Marcus and his associates will be held accountable for their actions." The media was in chaos. The truth had shattered the false narrative. Marcus was now on the defensive, scrambling to cover up his tracks. But the damage had been done. The public had seen the video. The world now knew what Marcus had tried to hide. As the press conference concluded, Elon could feel the weight of the battle beginning to shift in his favor. The storm hadn't passed yet, but the tide had turned. Later that night, Elon sat with Richard and Jenna in their office, watching as the story exploded across every major news network. The truth was out there. And now, the world would see just how deep the corruption ran. "We did it," Richard said, his voice full of awe. "We're not done yet," Elon replied, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Marcus and his allies won't go down without a fight. But we've won this round. And we'll keep fighting until the truth is undeniable." Jenna smiled, looking at Elon with a mix of pride and relief. "You've changed everything." Elon didn't respond right away. He was already thinking ahead, the weight of what was to come heavy on his mind. They had exposed the truth, but the battle wasn't over. Marcus and his network would retaliate. But now, they knew the truth. And that was the most powerful weapon of all. The storm had broken. And the reckoning had only just begun. The weeks that followed the explosive press conference were a blur of legal battles, public outcry, and relentless media attention. Elon's name was back in the headlines, but this time it wasn't for scandal, it was for justice. The truth had taken root in the public's consciousness, and Marcus, once a powerful figure in the game, was now the subject of investigation. But the fight wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Elon knew that this would not be a simple victory. Marcus wasn't going to fade into obscurity quietly, and neither would the forces backing him. The forces of corruption were too powerful, too ingrained, to fall easily. But that didn't stop Elon. This battle had taken him to new places, places he hadn't anticipated, but it had also shown him just how much power a single individual could have when armed with truth and a willingness to fight for it. One morning, as Elon sat at his desk, his phone rang. The familiar name on the screen made his stomach tighten. It was Jenna. "Elon, we've got a problem." Her voice was tight, and for the first time in a while, Elon could hear the strain in her tone. "What's going on?" he asked, his mind already racing. "They've gone on the offensive," Jenna replied. "Marcus has been rallying his backers. There's a new smear campaign against you, and they're targeting your business interests. They're pushing the narrative that you've been manipulating the media for your own gain, using your tech empire to spread misinformation and dominate markets. They've got some influential figures backing them, and it's starting to gain traction." Elon clenched his fists. He'd expected this. He'd known Marcus wouldn't just take the fall. But it was still infuriating. "Is it working?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. "Not yet," Jenna said, "but they're making a real push for it. We need to act fast. If this goes on for too long, it could tarnish everything, your company, your reputation, everything." Elon stood up from his desk, pacing as he listened. His mind raced, trying to think of their next move. This was exactly what Marcus wanted, to muddy the waters, to turn the tide back in his favor. But Elon wouldn't let that happen. "We need to flip the narrative," Elon said, his voice suddenly clear with resolve. "I'm not going to sit back and let them twist the truth. We're going to show the world that Marcus and his network are the ones manipulating everything. I've got a plan." That evening, Elon convened with Richard, Jenna, and the rest of his inner circle at a private meeting in their war room. The room was lit by a single, bright overhead light, the whiteboard at the front filled with names, timelines, and detailed strategies. Elon wasn't just strategizing a media response, he was preparing for his final confrontation with Marcus. "We can't wait for Marcus to make the first move this time," Elon said, his tone firm. "We need to make sure the world sees who the real manipulator is." Richard nodded. "We've been holding back some key pieces of evidence, footage from those early meetings, additional documents that we've uncovered over the last few weeks. We've been keeping them in reserve, hoping we wouldn't need to use them unless things got really bad." "Now's the time," Elon said, eyes sharp. We go on the offensive. We've got to expose him completely. Over the next 48 hours, Elon's team worked around the clock to put together a series of bombshell revelations. They secured interviews with whistleblowers who had worked directly with Marcus's network. They dug deeper into the secret meetings that Marcus had been a part of. And they pulled together a new, undeniable trove of evidence that linked Marcus directly to illegal dealings, including money laundering, bribery, and orchestrating a global campaign of misinformation. It was more than just a retaliation. This was the final blow. Elon didn't just want to expose Marcus. He wanted to dismantle the entire network, to tear down the web of lies that had held the world in thrall for so long. The next step was simple: release it all. The moment of truth came at a carefully orchestrated press event. Elon stood at the podium once again, his face calm, but his heart pounding with the knowledge of what he was about to do. This time, the world's eyes were on him, but it wasn't a press conference, it was the beginning of the end for Marcus. "Good evening," Elon began, his voice steady. "We've all been watching the media frenzy unfold over the past few weeks. Many of you have heard the lies, the accusations against me. Some of you have even believed them. But tonight, I'm here to make sure the truth is heard." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. The cameras clicked and buzzed in anticipation. For the past several months, we've been investigating the people behind the misinformation campaign. We've been digging into the heart of the corruption, the people who have used power and influence to manipulate the world for their own gain. And tonight, I'm releasing the final pieces of evidence. The documents, the recordings, the conversations that prove the full extent of the conspiracy. He gestured to the screen behind him, which flickered to life. One by one, the pieces of evidence flashed across the screen: recordings of Marcus in covert meetings, emails between him and high-profile political figures, evidence of illegal payments, and private discussions about how to orchestrate public chaos. The room was silent as the footage played. The air seemed to crackle with the gravity of what was unfolding. There were gasps of disbelief, murmurs of shock, and then, a collective realization that the truth was undeniable. Elon turned back to the camera. "You've seen the truth. This is who Marcus really is. This is the kind of world he was trying to create. A world where power is manipulated, truth is buried, and the people have no say." He straightened, looking directly into the camera. "But it ends now. We've exposed the lies. We've exposed the truth. And we will not stop until justice is served." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The evidence Elon released caused an uproar worldwide. Social media exploded. News outlets were forced to report on the truth, and Marcus's empire crumbled under the weight of his actions. His allies began to distance themselves, and his influence waned almost overnight. The authorities launched full-scale investigations into Marcus and his network, and within days, charges were filed. The public's perception of Elon had completely shifted, from a controversial figure to a hero who had dared to take on the corrupt systems of power. Weeks later, as the dust began to settle, Elon sat quietly in his office, reflecting on everything that had happened. Marcus was behind bars, and the conspiracy he had worked to expose had been shattered. But the victory had come at a great personal cost. The battle had changed him. "We did it," Richard said, entering the room with a grin. "We've won." Elon looked up, his face tired but resolute. "Yes, we did. But the fight isn't over. There's always more work to do. More systems to break. More truths to uncover." Jenna entered next, a smile on her face. "You've changed everything, Elon. You've shown that even one person can change the world. But I know you. You won't stop here." Elon leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the city below. "No. I won't stop. But for now, we've made a difference. And that's enough." As the world moved forward, one thing was certain: the reckoning had come. And the world would never be the same again. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?